Here's a story from over a decade ago, but trust me, I've moved on. While I might add some humor for entertainment, this was a tough time for me. I'm happily married now and doing well. So, back in 2010, I was 27 and in EMT training. My wife, 3 years younger, worked on base as a career planner for Marines. We had similar schedules but different days off. My job promised me the flexibility to switch days with other trainees once I completed a certain amount of training. One day, forgetting about a scheduled switch, I went to work on my day off. Figured I might as well hang out with my buddies for a bit. When I got home, I noticed a Dodge Challenger parked in my spot. Plenty of visitor parking, so no big deal. Quietly, I approached our apartment door, planning to surprise my wife. But then I heard yelling from our bedroom, which was odd because we usually watched adult videos in there together. I thought, well, maybe I can catch her solo and embarrass her. As I crept closer to the bedroom, the yelling sounded familiar, but not quite video familiar. When I reached the door, I froze. There, I saw my wife getting busy with some diesel jarhead, performing moves I'd only seen in wrestling matches. I was stunned, unable to move, and my wife noticed me after about 15 seconds. She angrily asked why I was home, and I stood there silently, looking at the ground. The other guy quickly got dressed and made for the door. I had a split-second decision to make: fight him, potentially lose my job and get arrested, or just let it go. I chose the latter, stepping aside as he passed. He gave me a brief nod of thanks before leaving. My wife, still angry, said I wasn't supposed to be home because it was her day off. I looked at her and calmly replied, "Every day is your day off from here on out." I felt a surge of coldness and confusion, like I was a complete failure. I had thought I was doing everything right. When I went downstairs, I saw the man still sitting in his car, talking on the phone. I couldn't believe he was still there, and in a fit of anger, I decided to just let it all out. I stormed back upstairs and grabbed one of my bowling balls, intending to smash something in frustration. But my wife intercepted me, blocking the door and pleading with me not to do it, saying he was leaving. I felt sick looking at her, wondering how she could protect him after what he'd done. Pushing past her, I hurled the ball into the street and finally broke down in tears. Yes, I cried. Everything I had was gone, and the man who took it from me had vanished, leaving me with no answers and no closure. I called my sister, and it's strange how women just seem to understand things intuitively. It showed how naive I was about certain things. My wife began crying too and suggested we talk before I reached out to my family. But I ignored her and left. After spending a couple of months living with my sister and her girlfriend, I found my own place and started studying nursing. My EMT training allowed me to work in nursing during my studies. I met many amazing women in the program, but the idea of a relationship made me feel vulnerable. Then, during my divorce proceedings, my wife somehow found out about my classes. She would show up and try to make a scene, talking about our personal life to make the female students jealous. It was awful and violated the restraining order. 8 months later, our divorce was nearing its conclusion. It was surreal when the man who had been involved with my wife reached out to me. He was leaving the military and planning to become a police officer. However, my wife had been harassing him, and he was seeking help. We decided to meet near the base. There he was, accompanied by another service member buddy of his. I felt a mix of emotions seeing him. He explained that my wife was suing him for emotional distress, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of poetic justice. I made it clear that his issues were not my concern, and I had no interest in getting involved. He offered to assist with the divorce to avoid alimony payments, but I saw through his empty gesture. I refused to cooperate and questioned his audacity in seeking my help after what he had done. I left the meeting feeling infuriated. I called my wife, but she didn't pick up, so I left her a voicemail. I warned her about her actions and threatened to report violations of our restraining order if she continued. I also mentioned that my new partner, a nurse from my program, was willing to support me. Now, things are looking up for me. I have a wonderful 1-year-old son, and his mother is incredible. We recently got married. I checked my ex-wife's social media and saw that she seemed to be doing well, traveling and modeling until the pandemic hit. Although I briefly considered reaching out to her, I decided it was best to let bygones be bygones. Story 2. I, 26, male, was in a relationship with a girl, 25, female, from my university, and everything was going well for the first 6 months. However, when my finals arrived, things took a turn for the worse. With the exams demanding more of my time for studying and preparation, I naturally had less time to spend with her. Initially, she seemed understanding when we discussed this, acknowledging the differences in our academic pursuits. I'm studying chemistry engineering while she's pursuing hospitality management, and she claimed she didn't mind the reduced time together. We didn't see each other for about a week and a half, although we still exchanged occasional texts during that time, albeit less frequently than before. One night, while I was busy finishing up some work, she started talking about her friend, let's call him Brian. According to her, Brian was a good friend, an extrovert with a wide social circle, unlike me, who was more introverted with a smaller circle of close friends. After my finals, we spent more time together, but it always seemed like Brian was a frequent topic of conversation. Initially, it was strange, but eventually, it became too much for me. One day, in a jest, I mentioned, "Are you sure you don't want to date Brian, considering how much you talk about him?" She didn't take it as a joke and instead became defensive, even insinuating that I accused her of cheating. That's when I started connecting the dots and became suspicious. Week after week, she would cancel plans at the last minute, or worse, stand me up, like on my birthday when we were supposed to meet at a restaurant with my dad to celebrate. Even my roommate noticed my distress and talked to me about it. After a few months, I arranged to meet my ex at a coffee shop. Throughout the week leading up to it, I'd been acting like a jerk. Mentally, I was already preparing to end the relationship. When she arrived, she tried to kiss me, but I pulled away. When she asked what was wrong, I simply said, "I already know." It was something my dad always said to make people confess when they were hiding something. As soon as I uttered those words and she saw my serious expression, she looked down and asked, "Who told you? Was it Kev?" Kev is my closest friend, but even if he had told me, I would have ignored it. So, I replied, "Maybe, but I want to hear it from you." She started crying, apologizing profusely, saying she didn't mean to hurt me and that she had been seeing Brian for 2 months. I wanted to cry, to yell, to be angry, but I couldn't. It was a truth I had already suspected. So, I asked her, "How did this happen?" Her story was that they met at a party when I was busy with finals, and she felt neglected. Brian comforted her, and she liked the feeling of being safe and loved in a different way. They ended up hooking up and started seeing each other every weekend. Hearing this felt like a punch to the stomach, making me feel sick. She tried to apologize and suggested we could still make it work, but deep down, I knew it was impossible. I told her to enjoy the last coffee we'd share because it was the last. I paid for both coffees and left without saying goodbye. That night, I called my dad and discussed it with him. I never asked my dad for advice in such situations, but he simply said that what's not meant to be will never be and that it's best not to harbor negative feelings towards her or the guy. He quoted his favorite artist, saying, "How beautiful is revenge when God grants it to us." Recently, one of her friends told me she got pregnant by Brian, who refused to take responsibility. Her friend also warned me that my ex was telling her parents it was my child, even though we broke up over a year ago. Now, I've decided to go with the flow of life. It took me a while to get over it, but I did. And now, I'm dating my former roommate, which is kind of funny. Story 3. Let me provide some background. My wife and I, both 54, have been married for 31 years. She works as an RN at a hospital, while I've been with a home builder since I was 18. Our 2 children are now in their 20s and no longer live at home. In our mid-40s, we decided to pursue my wife's dream of running a bed and breakfast. We've been searching on and off for years and stumbled upon a 5-acre property with a home built in the 1870s. The original owners were prominent landowners in the area with an extensive agricultural business empire. Over time, fewer family members wanted to continue farming, leading to the sale of parcels of land. Our town is experiencing growth due to its natural beauty and attractions, making it increasingly popular among tourists. The farmland along the main highways is being developed rapidly, but our property is away from the bustling highways. Since purchasing it, my wife and I have been renovating the entire house, aiming to restore it to its former glory from 150 years ago while also making a living. My wife has taken charge of decorating the rooms while I handle the renovations, paying for materials and any necessary professional help. I'm quite handy, so I handle most of the work myself. In the last few years, the housing industry has been booming, and we would have worked around the clock if possible. I was earning a significant income until last year when the pandemic hit, temporarily halting our work in 2020. Additionally, material shortages became a challenge. Throughout this time, my wife, being on the front lines, worked tirelessly for 18 months. She and other medical staff stayed at the hospital, some sharing rooms, leading to a close bond among the staff. The medical staff worked on a schedule of 4 weeks on and 2 weeks off, starting in March last year and continuing into the fall, then resuming after Thanksgiving. Despite the grueling schedule, my wife, after our children were older, volunteered to give up her time off to support colleagues who needed it, especially young parents who couldn't see their families. Other staff members also made similar sacrifices. The entire COVID experience changed her profoundly. Witnessing the suffering of patients on ventilators and the loss of lives deeply affected her. She became emotionally distant, and our sex life dwindled to nothing. I attributed it to either her traumatic experiences or her age. Despite my attempts to discuss it, she simply said she no longer felt the same way. However, we continued to work closely on renovating the house. We planned trips to an area known for its Amish population renowned for woodworking and sewing craftsmanship. We purchased several furniture pieces and handmade quilts for the bedrooms. Recently, we planned a trip to buy dining room furniture, and I also traded some wood I obtained from dismantling old barns, a side gig of mine, which is in high demand. One Friday morning, she informed me she was going on the trip with some workers because of a fall festival. Surprisingly, one of her co-workers at the bar that night had no knowledge of the trip. I texted my wife asking about her companions, and she mentioned her friends and someone named Stevie. I was perplexed as I had heard this name before, but always assumed it belonged to a woman. However, her friend clarified that Stevie was a man they worked with. Upon her return, she showed me the items she bought, but I noticed a bag she hid in the closet containing decorations for a college sports team's man cave, not something of interest to me. When I confronted her, she initially claimed Stevie was a female co-worker, but after further questioning, she tearfully admitted to having an affair with him since last year during the hospital lockdown. Now, she's staying in one of the finished bedrooms while I occupy our original bedroom. I plan to consult a lawyer on Monday as I'm unsure about the future of our house, business, and marriage. Despite her apologies, it's evident she's only remorseful for getting caught, not for the affair itself. When I asked her to end it with Stevie, she couldn't provide a definitive answer. Story 4. Greetings, I am devastated beyond words and feel as though my very soul has been torn from me. When Russia invaded Ukraine and war erupted, I was initially paralyzed by shock. However, I eventually realized I needed to take action. I traveled to Ukraine to assist my family and support refugees for a few weeks. Throughout this time, my partner was incredibly supportive. She would write to me daily, praising me as a hero and expressing her love, longing, and desire for me to send her Snapchats regularly. Our communication was excellent, and she sent the most affectionate texts. However, approximately 3 days before my scheduled return home, she abruptly stopped communicating with me and ignored my calls. She only responded twice over the next few days, with vague messages like "we will talk later" and a request for my flight information on the day of my departure. Just before she began ghosting me, I expressed how much I missed her and found solace in knowing someone was eagerly awaiting my return. She responded by suggesting we take a day off work to cuddle. To my dismay, she ghosted me at the airport and failed to pick me up upon my arrival home. When I reached our shared residence, she was nowhere to be found. Utilizing our location sharing feature, I drove to a random location within the city, hoping to find her. However, I found myself in front of unfamiliar apartments with no sign of her car. I repeatedly called her, even at 1 a.m., in an attempt to discuss our situation, but she turned off her phone, leaving me stranded and bewildered. The next morning, I reached out to her grandparents for answers. They were unsure of the situation but made inquiries on my behalf. Eventually, her younger brother informed me that she was staying at a family friend's house. Later that day, she finally returned home, albeit reluctantly, after her grandmother persuaded her not to end our relationship over the phone. Her demeanor was chillingly indifferent when she informed me that we needed to break up. She cited our differences and the need to go our separate ways. Despite my pleas for counseling or a discussion to salvage our relationship, she remained resolute. She expressed guilt and offered to relinquish our joint possessions, fund another person's participation in our planned trips, and allow me to stay in our place for a few more days if desired. I suggested going for a walk to discuss our situation, but she declined, citing errands and a friend's party. She seemed distant and unloving, a stark contrast to our previously affectionate relationship. When I inquired about her whereabouts the previous night, she claimed to have stayed at a family friend's house, but their denial in the morning cast doubt on her story. She refused to explain why she lied about her location and companion. 2 days before my return home, she blocked me on Snapchat and later blocked my number, only to unblock it when necessary for logistical matters related to moving out. We agreed to meet the following evening, but she changed her mind, stating that she didn't want to tarnish the respectful and civil interaction we had the day before. She expressed her belief that our relationship was doomed due to mutual hurt and lack of trust, asserting that she no longer felt a connection and had rediscovered herself during our time apart. She declared her forgiveness and urged me not to contact her or her acquaintances again, emphasizing the support she received from her loved ones. In response, I conveyed my desire for her happiness and expressed my enduring love for her, regardless of our romantic status. I sought closure and the opportunity for a final conversation between us. Last year was challenging for her, as she lost her mother to a rare brain disease. I stood by her side through her subsequent battle with suicidal depression, offering unwavering support even as I struggled with my own well-being. Following her recovery in the new year, I focused on myself until the outbreak of war, during which she encouraged me to assist refugees. I am perplexed and hurt by her sudden cruelty after 3 years of togetherness, especially considering our close bond and shared plans for the future. Her abrupt change in behavior, coupled with suspicions of infidelity, has left me deeply shaken and questioning the authenticity of our relationship. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel not to miss new videos.